That's okay.
Hello, this is Linda Comeau talking about the Constellations Conference coming up, 2015, North American Systemic Constellations Conference in San Diego in November. I'm Linda Comeau, and my guest today is Jade Barclay in Australia, talking about chronic fatigue and family systems constellations-based research. Her talk will be on Sunday morning, 10:30 to 12, I believe. Welcome, Jade.
Hello, Linda. Thank you so much for doing these interviews. It's the best idea.
Oh, thank you. It's been a blast, I have to say. So, to get us warmed up, tell us, what words do you use to describe constellations?
We don't plan it, and different people connect with different things. I've got, I connect with very, very different people. I connect with neuroscientists and I connect with crystal and energy healers. So depending on what their reference base is, I use different words. And most recently I found myself saying things like, well, because there's a lot of epigenetic research coming out that is showing with hard science the impact of our ancestors on our lives and on the way that our genes express themselves and things like that. I just say that I help with working with ancestral patterns to shift any personal or professional issues that might not be able to be worked with individually. So that's one way. And another way is it's a group experience, but we're working in service of one person, and through the group we can reveal any ancestral patterns that are having an impact on an individual's life or business.
Cool.
Yeah.
And tell us, Jade, do you use constellations for self-care?
Very much so. Very, very much so. I actually integrate constellations. I didn't even realize I was doing this until someone asked me about it, because constellations for me isn't just a healing modality. It's a perspective. It's a way of life. Once you've seen through that lens, you can't not see through that lens. For example, my son went through some things at school at the beginning of the year, and it was pretty crushing. And his first question was, "Hey, Mum, what did the rest of our family go through when they were 16? And that was his first question. And I had a look at it and it was like, 16 is horrifying in my ancestry. That is terrible. And for him the ripples of horror have gotten smaller and smaller in future generations. And for him to just have a couple of short months of horror instead of something that starts a lifetime's worth of pain is really, really nice. So with self-care, I already did blessings and remote healings and that kind of thing. And I realized that I integrate that in with a constellations perspective. So when I'm doing that kind of healing, it's not just for the person, it's for the whole system. Personally, there's things like, I always mispronounce this, the Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian, thank you, forgive me, I love you thing. I realized that I do that as a default with constellations. So it's not just thank you, it's thank you for my life. It's not just please forgive me, it's please bless me as I choose another way. And so there's the 4 little things that are healing and acknowledging and releasing at a system level rather than an individual level. So those are a couple of things that I do.
Great. I love them. Yeah, that's cool. Congratulations for having an aware son. Wow.
Thank you. It's a blessing and a curse. We'll go with the blessing. You can't get away with anything when they're watching.
Okay, so now let's talk about your talk. It sounds fascinating. Please give us a little bit of a breakdown.
Sure. Well, I'd really encourage anyone who has ever considered doing research or might consider doing research. If you have themes come into your practice, like you get 4 people with Lyme disease in a row or anything like that, there might be an opportunity for you to actually start documenting the results of Constellations. And so this is going to be interactive. We're going to be using my case study. I used Constellations as the research method during my master's thesis, and I investigated the systemic and multi-generational themes present within people who have chronic fatigue. And it was incredibly, incredibly fascinating. I learned more about chronic fatigue than I was ever able to discover in the previous 20 years, just from a few constellations.
Wow.
Really understood that Constellations reveals things that other research methods don't. And now that science is starting to show that our problems cross generations, we already have a way for our research and our treatments and our solutions to cross generations as well. And so most of the things that get used in traditional psychology and psychotherapy, they're evidence-based, but the evidence is self-reported and notoriously inaccurate. So the stuff that comes through in Constellations is incredibly, incredibly useful. We get access to embodied somatic themes that you can't talk about because you're not aware of. We get access to the interrelational bonding themes that led to the somatic embodiment of that. And you don't get access to that relational data during traditional interviews, and you get access to multi-generational themes. So with chronic fatigue, the point of movement in the system was never with the individual. It was always one generation back. Every single time. Every single time.
Wow.
And yeah, and the patterns that were playing out, loss patterns during teenage years in both the parents' lives and the people with chronic fatigue's lives, it was almost a mirror image. And that's a completely different approach to that particular. Now, when it comes to, I'm passionate about research because what gets researched and documented gets used more often in the world. It makes it to the journals. It actually starts to bubble up in a wider consciousness. And I've found that most of the techniques that are really, really effective and that work, the people are just getting out and using them, but they're not documenting them so that more people can use them. And I'd really like to help anyone who is considering with research. I'd love to help them do it.
Wow, this is going to be so exciting.
Well, I enjoy it. I'm looking forward to it. It's like people think research is really, really boring, but I always found, even when I was doing my master's degree, which is in counselling, and research was an elective at that time. They've since changed it and made it so that it's mandatory, so all the students have to do it, which I think is wonderful. But it was an elective, and we had very few people go through and do research. We probably had less than 5% of the counsellors coming through do some kind of research. But everybody who did said that it was the most rewarding and challenging. It stretched you, but it integrated everything that you'd learned. And I had that experience myself. It was really, really beautiful. So it's just with the Constellations perspective, most of Western society and medicine and business and everything else in between has a very individualistic lens that they look through. And it's like you're looking to find one biomarker in one human and have one test that gives one drug that fixes one problem. And everything is zooming in, whereas Constellations is And almost every time, problems are not being expressed in the same place that those problems originated. But our methods of research and our methods of treatment assume that if you've got this symptom, then that's where we need to look for the problem. Whereas if I come back, I do a lot of acupuncture and traditional Chinese massage as a self-care thing myself. And that perspective and the constellations perspective is like, well, there is flow. There are things that are connected. If something is going on here, it's like constellations is the meridians of the family system as opposed to the meridians of the body. But it's showing how something over here can be out of whack and it shows up somewhere else entirely, but we get an understanding of how those things are connected, and then we can work with them effectively. So the constellations lens, it's really beautiful. It's hard to see things from an individualistic perspective once you've actually dipped your toe in the water with constellations, and I love that. I really, really love that. And I've found that the people that see the world in this way are actually answering and asking questions that are worth researching. But they're doing that beautifully and in the moment without taking notes. So it doesn't count. No one hears about it. That's like the people that in the counseling degree that I did that had the most interesting questions, they also lacked a lot of confidence in themselves academically. And most of the people that think really, really well academically do so because they were very obedient and did what they told for a lot of years at school. And they're not asking questions that are very, very far outside the box. So thankfully, I was able to help a few of them actually do research. And one of them did an amazing research project on trauma. That was, I don't know if you know, in Australia, we've got a Royal Inquisition going on into sexual abuse in institutions, starting with the church and then moving on into entertainment and other institutions. And it's massive. It is absolutely huge. And I'm grateful that a light is being shone on trauma in general, because when we're working with constellations, we're usually working with trauma of some kind. And it's been so taboo to even talk about that for a long time. But this Inquisition is happening, and one of the girls who wasn't confident but had incredibly wonderful questions, she'd literally have panic attacks before writing an essay, and I put her together and we'd make sure her essay got done. But she actually did this amazing project on the vicarious trauma being experienced by the counsellors in that Royal Inquisition. And it's making a massive difference in changing operational health and safety standards and things like that, all because something that seems obvious when we look at it from this perspective actually got studied and documented. So I would love for more constellations facilitators to have a way of integrating research into their practice.
Well, after this talk, Jade, they will. Yay!
Oh, good. Good, good, good.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was precious.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think this is a very interesting topic. At first, I wasn't quite sure where you were going to go, but this is so glad we did this video for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Can I just say one more reason that I love constellations?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I find constellations does is it helps us get rapport with the parts of ourselves and the parts of our system that have previously been invisible and unseen. And that's, I actually said this, Carl Buchheit and I have a book coming out that is on exactly that, establishing rapport with your brain's natural processes, with your embodied relational processes, and establishing rapport with life and the universe. And it's only through constellations that we've been able to do that. And yeah, so yeah, if anyone had any questions about that, after we finish talking about research, then that would be really, really wonderful too.
And when will this book be coming out, Jade?
Before Christmas, I'm definitely going to have samples available for everyone at the conference if they would like it. So we can get started with some of that, but hopefully before Christmas is what we're aiming for.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, pre-orders.
Definitely. Go to innerhabits.com. We'll make sure that you get a copy.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. So Jade's talk is Sunday morning, Chronic Fatigue and Family Systems Constellations-Based Research. Thank you again, Jade. We'll see you at the conference.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, bye-bye.